It's midday, roughly 79 AD, and you're sitting on a stone bench in the Roman Forum with absolutely nothing to do. No phone. No scroll worth reading twice. Just you, a pigeon. And the slow realization that you have 4 more hours of daylight to survive. Welcome to the single most underrated crisis of the ancient world. Here's your open loop for today. First, the surprisingly violent thing Romans carved into public benches out of pure boredom. Second, the gambling addiction that got emperors banned from their own laws. And third, the one Roman philosopher who diagnosed boredom 2,000 years before psychologists gave it a fancy name. So how exactly did your Roman ancestors kill the hours when there was nothing to kill? Here's the thing Hollywood never tells you. You picture ancient Rome as one endless parade of gladiator fights and orgies back to back, sunrise to sunset. The truth is duller and frankly funnier. Most days in Rome looked a lot like most days now. You worked, you ate, you waited around, and when the waiting got unbearable, you improvised. Think about what an actual afternoon looked like for you as an ordinary Roman. Business in the Forum wrapped up by early afternoon. The baths did not open until later. There was no television, no internet, not even reliable street lighting once the sun went down. That left you with hours of dead time and whatever you could scrape together with your own hands. So Romans got creative and sometimes deeply petty about filling the silence. Take a walk through the ruins of Pompeii today, and you will find something almost embarrassingly relatable. Scratched into the plaster walls, thousands of pieces of graffiti, and a huge chunk of them are just bored people killing time. Insults about the neighbors, bad poetry, someone's running tally of a dice game. One wall even has a crude scoreboard for a local gladiator, tracking his wins like a kid tracking baseball stats. Let that sink in for a second. 2,000 years before sports apps, Romans were doodling box scores into wet plaster because they were stuck somewhere with nothing else to do. And boredom did not just live on the walls. It lived in your hands. Archaeologists keep pulling small carved game pieces out of Roman sites all over the empire, from taverns in Italy to military forts as far north as Britain. The most popular game was called Ludus Latrunculorum, the game of little soldiers, a strategy game a bit like checkers crossed with chess, where you tried to trap your opponent's pieces on a grid board. Roman soldiers stationed on the freezing edge of the empire carved their own boards straight into stone floors and windowsills. Think about that. You are a legionary 1,000 miles from home, guarding a wall against people who genuinely hate you. And your entertainment budget is a rock and a pocket knife. The Vindolanda tablets, a stash of thin wooden writing slips dug up near a Roman fort in northern Britain, back this up in almost heartbreaking detail. These are not grand political letters. They are shopping lists, complaints about the weather, requests for warmer socks, and casual notes between soldiers about what to do with their downtime. One famous tablet is literally a birthday party invitation from one officer's wife to another. Life on the edge of the empire was cold, muddy, and mostly uneventful, and the tablets prove that even hardened soldiers spent as much energy planning small, social gatherings as they did preparing for battle. You also had another popular board game called tabula, an ancestor of modern backgammon, played with dice and counters on a board that could fold up small enough to carry into a bathhouse or a tavern. Emperor Zeno, centuries later, was apparently so bad at tabula that his disastrous loss got recorded for posterity, which tells you 2 things. Romans took their board games seriously enough to document a bad roll for history, and even an emperor could get absolutely destroyed by his own dice. Here's where things get weird. Boredom in Rome was not just a personal annoyance, it was practically a public health issue for the elite. The philosopher Seneca, tutor to the Emperor Nero, wrote entire essays warning wealthy Romans about a condition he called tedium vitae, roughly translated as weariness of life. Seneca described rich men pacing their villas, unable to sit still, unable to read, unable to relax, constantly changing rooms and cities looking for relief, from the crushing sameness of having absolutely everything and nothing to do with it. In other words, ancient Rome had its own version of doom-scrolling burnout, and the cure was not a beach vacation. It was cold baths, philosophy, and being told sternly to get over yourself. But if you were not a stressed-out senator, if you were just an ordinary Roman with an afternoon to kill, your options multiplied fast. Dice were everywhere, small carved cubes made of bone, and Romans gambled on them constantly, despite it technically being illegal outside of festival season. Emperors themselves broke this rule shamelessly. The historian Suetonius records that the Emperor Claudius was so obsessed with dice that he had a special board built into his carriage so he could gamble even while traveling, because apparently even absolute power over the known world does not cure the urge to roll a 6. Taverns were the other great boredom antidote, and Pompeii again gives us the receipts. Painted scenes on tavern walls show men playing board games so competitively that arguments break out mid-match, complete with speech bubbles reading insults at each other over a disputed move. This was not quiet, dignified leisure. This was two guys yelling about a board game in a bar, which, let's be honest, has not changed even slightly in 2,000 years. The poet Martial, who wrote biting little poems about everyday Roman life, complained constantly about clients like you who wasted entire days wandering from patron to patron, killing time with idle gossip just to seem busy and important. He mocked men who spent from dawn to dusk doing essentially nothing productive except being seen in the right places. Sound familiar? Swap the toga for a blazer, and Martial is basically describing someone padding out their day with unnecessary meetings. And then there was the big stuff, the entertainment Rome actually gets famous for. Chariot races at the Circus Maximus could pull in 250,000 spectators in a single afternoon, more people than most modern stadiums hold today, all screaming for one of 4 racing teams, the reds, whites, blues, or greens. This was not a casual hobby. Romans formed lifelong loyalties to a chariot team color the way people today live and die by a football club, and riots occasionally broke out between rival fans. Boredom, it turns out, is a powerful enough force to fill an entire stadium. Gladiator games served the same purpose, but with even higher stakes. These were not just brutal spectacle. They were the ancient world's biggest entertainment industry, complete with celebrity fighters whose names, records, and even their fan mail have survived on Pompeii's walls. One piece of graffiti simply reads that a gladiator named Ludus makes the girls sigh, which is either the earliest surviving example of a fan crush or proof that some things about being famous never change. For the truly desperate, there was always Saturnalia, Rome's wild winter festival, when the normal rules flipped completely. Slaves were served by their masters, gambling was suddenly legal for everyone, and the entire city basically declared a week-long holiday from being bored, or from being anything resembling normal at all. If your calendar year felt like an endless stretch of the same routine, Saturnalia was the release valve built right into the Roman system. Now here is your modern mirror. Strip away the togas and the marble columns, and Roman boredom looks almost identical to yours. They scratch jokes into walls, you scroll through memes. They obsessed over chariot team colors. You argue about football on social media. They carved secret game boards into stone when no one was watching. You sneak a mobile game during a boring meeting. The tools changed completely. The itch behind them did not change at all. So next time you catch yourself staring at your phone for the 40th time in an hour, take a little comfort. Somewhere in the ruins of Pompeii, a bored Roman 2,000 years ago was doing the exact same thing, just with a chisel instead of a screen, killing time one scratch at a time. If this gave you a new appreciation for how relentlessly human boredom actually is, leave a comment telling me what you would have done with an idle afternoon in ancient Rome, and hit subscribe so you never miss the next weird corner of history we dig up.